today all the way from Nanaimo, British Columbia. Let's hear it for our musicians. We are here today to show that we care. We're here today to show that we care about freedom. We're here today to show that we care about conscience. Now, all of us have lines that we will not cross. And this includes people of all faiths or no faith. And we're here today to celebrate those persons, past and present, who resist pressure and who instead follow their hearts, conscientious objectors. Now, we're here also to celebrate those who fought and sacrificed,
4 hours
and in some cases died, in order to preserve for us the freedom to follow our consciences. In fact, today you are going to join their ranks. I want to give you a little bit of a history lesson so that you know the context about what brings us here today. And you need to know that our freedom to follow our own conscience was first officially recognized in Canada literally hundreds of years ago, in the Militia Act of 1793, which said as follows: persons called Quakers, Mennonites, and Tunkers, brethren in Christ, who from certain scruples of conscience decline bearing arms, shall not be compelled to serve in the militia. That was in 1793, well over 200 years ago. And in 1968, this provision was amended to apply to individuals of any religious denomination who are otherwise subject to military duty, but who from the doctrines of his religion is adverse to bearing arms and refused military service. In 1917, the availability of conscientious objection was further broadened to include anyone who, quote, conscientiously objects to the undertaking of combat service and is prohibited from doing so by the tenets and articles of faith. Now, after that, there was a period of lobbying to even further broaden conscientious objector status to include non-religious reasons of conscience. And in December 1940, an order in council did broaden the religious basis for conscientious objection to include any Christian with a conscientiously held belief. And then the final change came in 1942. Now, I've lost track of the years. A lot of things that I grew up with are now considered historical events, but I'm pretty sure that 1942 was probably about 70 or 80 years ago. And at that time, the change allowed for conscientious objector status to be claimed on non-religious but conscientiously held beliefs. And you know how much we value conscientious objection? So much so that even when there is no conscription, right now, for example, we don't conscript anyone to military service. Since the mid-1990s, the Defense Department made a commitment to allow persons with a genuine change of heart to leave the military before their agreed 5-year commitment of service was up. Even with no conscription, we still honor the idea that citizens should not be compelled to act against their conscience. And finally, one more recent innovation since the late 20th century, the term conscientious objector has also been extended to those working for the military-industrial complex due to a crisis of conscience. So it's not just people who are actually enrolled in the armed services, but anyone who might be working in an industry that supports the armed services now can be called a conscientious objector. Here's what's important about all of that. Even during two great world wars, when Canada's very existence was at stake. Canada still guaranteed everyone the freedom to consciously object to causing anyone's death. Even in a time of crisis, even when the Democratic majority thought it was perfectly desirable to kill enemy soldiers in defense, we still allowed citizens to refuse to cause anyone's death. And you know what? It was because of the challenges of those world conflicts, not in spite of them, but because of them, that the wise leaders of the world guaranteed in 1948 that all peoples would remain free, with Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 18 states, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and belief. And this declaration, it wasn't just empty words. It was the sturdy foundation for civilized democracy purchased with blood. And I tell you, it is now monstrous to cast aside those ideals. All of this history tells us that Canadians have, until very recently, never tried to limit the freedom to follow one's own conscience. Quite the contrary. In the true spirit of a liberal and a progressive democracy, Canadians have adapted and broadened that freedom until now. Of course, until very recently, military service was one of only a very few occupations where anyone was allowed to deliberately cause someone's death. And that's why we protected military conscripts who refused, for reasons of conscience, to take someone's life. Recently, however, Canada's Supreme Court has added the medical professions to those where deliberately causing someone's death is permissible. Now let me make it clear. We are not here tonight to challenge that decision. For better or for worse, the court has decreed the establishment of assisted suicide availability for Canada. And we're not here this evening to try to persuade anybody about whether assisted suicide is for better or for worse. No. Tonight, we're here simply to defend every citizen's right to conscientiously object to being compelled against their will into violating their conscience. We're here tonight, this evening, to show that we care about freedom and to help us to understand what a difference freedom can make in our lives and what a difference losing your freedom can make. We've invited 3 conscientious objectors to share their stories with us this evening. And I'm going to begin by introducing to you Dr. Mark D'Souza. Dr. D'Souza is a good Ontario boy born and raised in Toronto. He is an emergency medicine doctor in Toronto, but he also practiced palliative care, at least until the recent passage of Bill 84 in Ontario. Dr. D'Souza is an assistant professor at Queen's University, so he has a status of scholar that I certainly don't lay claim to. He's also a regular guest columnist with the Toronto Sun. And he told me, just as a fun fact, so that you know he knows where he is, that he spent 6 weeks at Grand River Hospital in Kitchener during his residency delivering babies. So please offer a warm Kitchener Waterloo welcome to Dr. Mark D'Souza.